It's not the low-level jobs, it's the college degree jobs that getting disappeared.
What does that mean for young people? What do you tell them?
At some point, that brings you a collapse.
Right, so how do we find that balance between, finding a way for people to be not working to death, but then also encouraging more openness and getting less regulation and finding more innovation?
Democracy as a model, it's not the worst, but it's not best either.
What's the role of AI in government? Welcome to Mork Unfiltered, folks. Today we have a very special guest. My guest today is somebody that I've known for many, many years, both personally and professionally. He is Ilja Laurs. He's a serial entrepreneur, investor, and public figure who has shaped the technology landscape for over 2 decades. Ilja has been recognized by the World Economic Forum, by CNBC, by CNN, by Wall Street Journal, by a whole bunch of different credible, super credible organizations and institutions for his immense contributions to the world of technology. He currently lives in Lithuania, where he leads the Next Street Group, where he invests in startups and billion-dollar firms, technology firms alike. I had the privilege of working as his chief marketing officer for one of his early endeavors, GetJar, which was one of the first app stores and something that had a meteoric rise in 2008-2010 timeframe, and at one point was one of the largest app stores. I've seen firsthand working with him what it takes to scale a company from nearly nothing to tens of millions of users. Today, we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of things. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. We're going to be talking about AI and Europe's place in AI and Europe's relevance within the context of AI. We're going to be talking about leadership under pressure and what it really takes to make a bet on the future. But first and foremost, we're going to rewind the clock a little bit and go back to Ilja's early days. So, Ilja, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me. Super lucky to be here.
It's great to have you on the show, Ilja. So I want to kind of go back to the where it all started, and tell us a little bit. Where did your interest in technology come from? Because if I remember correctly, you started out kind of learning how to develop, then you got into mobile, games development. Where did your fascination with technology and mobile gaming come from?
Well, yeah, interesting that you asked, because apparently my university was not technology. It was banking, finances, so all the boring stuff. Ironically, I'm coming back to what I learned only 30 years later. And that was the era of the beginning of the internet.
Right.
So we're talking 95, 96, where internet was very new. And technology, as a kid, I started to code at the age of 3.
Wow, at the age of 3?
Well, if you could call RUN and then game name as a coding or something,
right.
Because my parents, luckily engineers, had access to super early computers in early 80s. So I had this luxury of having touched the first computers back then. And since then, this feeling that you can command the machine, like a kid, you say it's wow, it's so complicated, so scientific. And you as a kid can press and it actually works.
Yeah.
It executes your command, and the machines were like that, not like that.
Yeah.
So that left a lasting feeling. And since then, I was always trying to follow the technology and started to code as early as basic as a language started to exist. We're talking when there was 10 or 20 commands were available.
Yeah.
Just for reference, nowadays languages have hundreds of thousands of commands anyway. Yeah. So I was following up, and then internet came. I realized 2 things. One is that coding internet was super easy at that time.
Right.
Just super simple commands, not sophisticated interfaces, etc. But B, suddenly I found every single company, bakery, hotel, air travel company, everybody needed a website.
Sure, of course.
And then I realized that I could either go work as a cashier and earning maybe €2 per hour, or spend 30 minutes coding something and charge $500.
Yeah.
Because I could build websites.
Yeah.
So websites was the very first niche, and apparently it got evolved, developed, and then scrolling 5 years later, mobile came as a technology.
Yeah.
And apparently, marketing guy, that only 2 things lift technology, porn and games.
Yeah.
I was not into porn.
Yeah.
But I was into games. So as a company, little company, we're talking 5-ish guys at that time. We liked to develop games, and we started to develop games for...
Oh, so your cousin, Pavel, right?
including my cousin Pavel and then some other guys. So we coded games, and what we discovered, because there were like so many different mobile phones, testing on maybe thousands of phone models and phones was impossible. Like we didn't have budget for that.
Right.
So we developed like a beta testing little like site, and we said, hey, like we like place our beta versions of the games there, and then anybody can come in and download for free. In exchange, we just ask like a feedback, like does it work on your Nokia 8110? Does it work on your Nokia 6320? Etc. So we crowdsourced the beta testing as opposed to having it internally. And also, like again, because we were very early into developer community, we shared that resource with our developers, saying, hey, like we're not the only ones producing games and facing that fragmentation problem. So why don't our developers come in place? And soon, like 6 months since we launched, we had maybe like a couple hundred of early betas and etc., but they were free.
Right.
And what we did not realize at the moment is the consumers had the same issue of discovering content.
Exactly. How do I find apps, right?
Exactly.
How do I find games?
Because as you remember, the world back then was controlled by carriers.
Oh man, I was selling games to carriers. I remember because we suffered through that, right? I was going to like the top of the mountain to Vodafone to try and beg them to put games on their portal.
They were corporations, and they had zero motivations of putting free stuff, fun stuff, because that would cannibalize their SMS business, their like sales, etc. So there was like no place to discover apps. They did not realize that. So once we put the two companies together, a small, tiny developer community and content, and then the consumers would come and flood.
Right, exactly.
As I remember, early days, our traffic would double every 2 weeks.
So
just crazy. Purely organic, like zero marketing spend, etc. So we predicted first month we would have like maybe 10,000 downloads. We had 1 million, and then like 100 million, and then had 1 billion, and then marketing headline, which you put together 3 billion, and so on and so on.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So we discovered very soon that as opposed to producing games, focusing on the app store is a much better business. So this is how it all started.
Yeah, and it was crazy because when I first met you, I was working for a mobile games company, Glue.
Yeah,
had just gone public on the NASDAQ, right?
Yeah.
So we were all very proud and very happy about that. And then I'll never forget the call that I got from Excel Partners, the famous VC in Silicon Valley, from Heikki, right? Who said, "Hey man, congratulations on the IPO. I've got something very interesting. What are you up to next? You should really take a look at this startup." And I remember scrolling through the early website, which looked horrible.
Well, you're a marketing guy.
I was like, what is this website? There's like, nude girls from Hungary and like, racing apps and then like weather apps. And I was like, what is this place? And then I was scrolling through the website, and all of a sudden it dawned on me. I was like, oh my God, this is like an app store, right? All these apps are available for free for download, and I don't have to use a carrier, right? I don't have to use a mobile operator. And so that's when I realized it dawned on me how big it was that what you guys had built, right? And it's crazy how you went from this platform of, a place where mobile app developers can basically upload their builds and get feedback, to all of a sudden going to a consumer-facing destination to sell games, right? So, it's at what point in your journey did you realize that GetJar could be really huge?
I had a very funny call one day from also Excel Partners, a guy called Rich Wong, and he was a partner at Excel Partners, and reminding the viewers that Excel Partners behind Facebook and some other like really notable companies, etc. Believe it or not, at that time, I had like no clue what VCs are, like no clue whatsoever.
Yeah.
And one day, one of my developers like brings up a phone and says, "There's somebody calling in English."
Yeah.
And wants something. And at that time, Lithuanians, not were as good at English as they are now.
Right.
So he had like no clue what's there, and I pick up the phone, and there's this boy like, "Hey, like I'm Rich Wong from Excel Partners." Like the tone is like as if like God is talking to you, so like expect some reaction. And I go like, "Okay, Excel Partners, like who?" The guy tones down a little bit.
Yeah.
And says, "Well, Excel Partners, we're like the venture capital firm."
Right.
Again, believe it or not, albeit I had like my 6 years of financial education, I had no clue at that time. We're talking here 2007-ish of what VCs were. And I say like, venture capital who?
Yeah.
He tones down even more
and
says, "Well, we're investing in startups. We invested in Facebook."
Yeah.
And then there was like a top of conversation, believe it or not, year 2007 ago, like Facebook who?
They're like, what's Facebook?
And then a pause, like 30 seconds or 40 seconds.
It's like, who am I talking to? This guy doesn't even know Facebook.
Yeah. So the guys put in conversation. Yes. So this is where meetings maybe like a dozen passed, and apparently like he flew to Lithuania, I flew to London. We started to chat. So I'm very grateful to this guy for just like showing like what the real tech world is, how it developed, etc. And this is the moment I say, wow. Like, I thought like, like 100 million users. So, I mean, we have it in our backyard, but that could be like a world company. Before that, I had like no idea that a tiny company from Lithuania could be world scale. Zero idea.
Yeah.
So after learning all that and saying, like we're no different from the others of the world. It's like same world, same technology. So this is where I felt, maybe we have a shot at actually building something big. So this was the moment.
That was the moment. No, because it was crazy. Because I remember, when I flew to Lithuania and I met with you, and I never forget, you showed me the servers, the logs of the downloads. And I remember looking at the logs of the downloads, and, I had been selling mobile games to carriers for like 5 years, right? And I was like, oh my God, this team of like 6 dudes in Lithuania has more downloads per month with no marketing budget and no brand than all the mobile carriers in Europe combined. And that's when it hit me. I was like, oh my God. I was like, this thing is going to be huge. And of course, that's when I joined you as like, I think I was employee number 7 right behind, Bill Scott. And then, we did some incredible things with GetJar. Kind of in hindsight, when you look at, GetJar's meteoric rise, right? And then the subsequent challenges, when we found ourselves as a company, the ham and the sandwich between, Google on the one hand, kind of like pushing Android and being pre-installed on phones, and then Apple, with the iPhone. What do you think your biggest learning was out of, that period? And what did you learn about yourself as a leader, with all the challenges and the meteoric growth on one hand and all the challenges that came afterwards? What's your takeaway from that?
We'll answer with a life story that happened much later.
Yeah.
So I was into biking. I was biking into my office every single morning, like 25 kilos to the office, 25 out of the office. And one day, just biking on the road and observing obeying all the rules, I was hit by the bus.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that part.
It was like a somewhat fun story because the journalists appeared like much faster than ambulance and police, but that's a separate story. But
isn't that always the case? The journalists are always faster than the ambulance and the police.
Yeah, so it starts with pictures.
Anything for a good story.
Ambulance, police, but that's a separate story.
Yeah.
And then I take a life lesson, like as if you're a bike, you cannot run against a bus, regardless of whether you're right or not.
Yeah.
Much later, again, police said, the bus driver was wrong. And, we fined him, don't worry, Ilya, 28 euro he paid penalty or whatever, fines or whatever for hitting you. But anyway, so if you're a bike and you're running against a bus, you have very little chances regardless of whether you're right or wrong.
Yeah.
So apparently at that point, we owned the Nokia world.
Yeah.
But Nokia disappeared without any traces. And between the trains or the trucks or the buses of Google and Apple, there was like very little place. So we were very lucky to reshape the business, and apparently we got out of the business by selling to a Chinese company quite early. So we were okay, but the lesson I took is, once you run against the big ones of the world, then simply the rules of the game just don't exist.
Yeah.
One of the lessons. But anyway, it helped me say go back, and then I started my VC chapter. Then I got into more sophisticated stuff, finances. So first funding startups, then building hedge funds.
Yeah.
So then apparently I tried to follow the technology. So right now it's a bread and butter business, which is primarily investing, and there's I call it still like a hobby fund business. I still do startups. I follow the technology. At that point, probably I try to chase both something interesting happening in technology, but also the societal changes.
Right.
So that's the reason I really follow the blockchain, the decentralization. So these technologies, I think, not only are interesting from investment/commercial perspective, but also they are there to change the world specifically to avoid challenges like the big corp or big tech are facing. Like the internet, as it was like 20 years ago, is completely done.
Yeah.
It's between governments and corporations. The freedom just doesn't exist at all.
Yeah.
So many developer in the developer community are talking internet is dead. The principles of being like open, free, etc., that were like evangelized, practiced. Internet was built like 30 years ago. It just no longer exists.
Yeah.
Like app stores, as you know, completely controlled by the Googles or the Apples.
Yeah.
They decide like who live, who not.
Yep.
And the other chunk is the governments who say, well, like your site is like whatever, like it's a propaganda site, so we shut it down. It's like a illegal messaging, shut it down, and so on. So Telegram is being kicked for like many years. TikTok, we always say that, okay, we're gonna ban TikTok from the US. So that does not resemble the open and free internet as it was.
Yeah.
So again, coming back to your question, nowadays it consumes me that yes, we want to build the technology for a better world.
And when you think of where technology is going, and of course the last 3 years have been insane, right? With what we've seen with OpenAI and Perplexity and all these new technologies, and now agentic, and everything else. What in your opinion, what's the next $100 billion opportunity?
Well, first, I do believe that we're looking into one-man unicorns, then one-man decacorns, and then one, because 20 years ago, to build even a small startup, you still needed like 5-ish guys. You needed developers, copywriters, marketers, etc.
Yeah.
So, and nowadays, basically all the supporting tools are available free of charge, fast. And you can do copywriting, you can do design, you can do coding, you can do marketing, everything automated. So basically, it's like your pure thought, like what you think the world needs in terms of like next game or next service or next product or next like entertainment piece, and that's it. So your thought directly translates into the product.
Right.
So I think what we're definitely gonna see is that no longer we need big companies to produce fun stuff.
Right.
I think the comparison we can use here is from media, from entertainment. 20 years ago, it would take a couple hundred guys at Hollywood to produce a movie.
Yeah.
Right now, we're talking about generations of creators.
Yep.
Like I wake up, I produce my content, and then I go brush my teeth. That's it. So I think the world is going there.
Right.
And I was actually, yesterday I was running and thinking that we're falling into extreme world where basically nothing exists except the creators and the followers.
Yeah, we talked about that before the show.
Yeah, so some people, some part of their time create. What create is secondary. I can create a game, I can create a TikTok short cartoon, I can create a book, I can create a car, I can create a robot, I can create like maybe a house. Just by thinking about that, then there are like all the tools. And they're like followers that choose to say, well, like I want to follow you and use your game and use your like movie and live in your design of the house, etc. Right. So that's where I think the world is heading.
So you're a consumer or a creator, essentially.
Exactly.
Right. Now, what does that mean for a lot of people? Because I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day that said that they're already statistically starting to see a material impact on the rate at which graduates graduating from college here in the United States are struggling more and more to find entry-level jobs, right? Whether you're going into an entry-level accounting job, coding job, marketing job, some of those jobs are starting to disappear already. What does that mean for young people? Like if you're giving advice to a 21-year-old college graduate in Lithuania, or even here in the US, what do you tell them?
Well, two remarks. So one is I think that as a generation, I've read that stories, I agree with them, that intellectually, like the current generation is probably at the top of intellectual abilities because before we really never had a challenge, like we never had like coding requirements, skills, etc. to learn something complicated.
Right.
So life was simple before, then it became complicated. But after, also, like our intellectual needs are not in demand because a computer will take on.
Right.
So what happens is 5 years ago, everybody was talking, hey, like the robots are going to rise, and everybody thought that it's the low-level jobs that are going to disappear first.
Right, that's what they all thought. Right.
So we're talking the drivers, the waiters, etc., because they were associated with simplicity, and simplicity everybody felt was easily taken by the AI, robots, and technology.
Yeah.
What happened in reality, and this only happened it became clear maybe 3 years ago, is that it's not the low-level jobs, it's the high-level jobs. The developers, the copywriters, the legal advisors, etc., the doctors. So it's the college degree jobs that getting disappeared.
Right.
And totally the opposite, the demand for low-level jobs is just increasing because people want to get their order from a waiter.
Right.
They don't want to scan QR code and do self-service. They just don't want that.
Until the robots come.
Well, I have a gut that still many people would prefer a real person, giving you a real menu, choosing and talking and saying, hey, how are you today, sir, etc., as opposed to this machine.
Yeah.
So that the world was not prepared for. So the story that the parents were telling the kids, go to college, only then you get a decent job, no longer plays.
Yeah.
Because finish the college and you find yourself unable to compete with a computer.
Yeah, especially in this country where, you graduate from college and you can be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in debt, right? I mean, my son is 18. He just graduated high school 6 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And he basically came to me and said, Dad, I'm not going to college.
So
and we had a long talk about it. And he was like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur like you, like Mom. I'm going to learn how to do this. I'm going to learn how to do that. And he decided to go off to the middle of Iowa to do door-to-door sales because he wants to learn how to sell. And that's a skill which is never going to go out of demand, and you're always going to need humans to some extent in the sales process. So I've lived that firsthand as a parent to see my son, be one of the first not to go to college. And initially that was quite frightening, but the more I thought about it, and the more I thought how he thinks and where the world is going, I was like, well, apart from the brand and obviously the networking and collaboration and the fun, where's the value in college?
So definitely the whole paradigm around education and getting a degree and paying heavily for that and repaying the debt because of a high-paid job, that completely changes, completely changes. The bad, as you say, you finish in university just to discover that your skill is not in demand because you cannot compete with ChatGPT.
That's the worst.
That's the worst. The good is, I think, if you start to question the whole model of how people choose their jobs, their work, etc. If you drill into the numbers, it doesn't look good. Because talking about the US, 70% of people are unhappy with their jobs. They do because they have to do.
But that's a global number. I mean, the statistics from Gallup is that 70% of people globally are disengaged at work.
Yeah, we're now sitting in the US, so I would focus on the very developed country like the US, but I think that the whole model where vast majority of the people declare they don't like, they're not happy with what they're doing during their longest non-sleeping daytime interval.
Right.
That's wrong. That's wrong to start with. Exactly. That is very wrong. But the only reason why it works that way here in the US and globally is because people need money to pay for their food, to pay for their mortgages, etc., and they need to work and do what they don't like.
Exactly.
To get the money. So the whole model is wrong to start with.
Exactly.
But there was no alternative. Now, if you really look where the economy is heading, we're talking about the people-less economy, where all the services, all the goods, all the wealth, all the value is built by the machines and the robots.
Yeah.
In much, much, much bigger scale than humans can build themselves.
Yeah.
So technically speaking, people no longer have to work to live. And that frees up the resources. So basically you can decouple.
But if they're not working to live, where are they getting the money from?
Well, first, I definitely think that the world is heading towards universal income model.
Universal basic income.
Yes.
So this idea that the government basically gives you money every month to
I would question if the government is the source, or it's the private funds, or it's the individual entrepreneurs, etc. So I would question just the government
where the money comes from.
Because the government tends to swallow the money and use for wars.
yeah, they are not the best custodians of our money.
So they may not be the source, but I think we're heading where the all wealth in the world is built human-less way.
Right.
Then portion of that is redistributed as universal income. And then people are free to choose what they want to do in life. Maybe just nonprofit, maybe do sports, maybe do social activity, maybe spend their life as influencer creating like TikToks because there is a demand for that.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, we are heading towards a world where, since I can no longer drive Uber because Uber drives itself, since I can no longer deliver pizza because you got a robot, on a motorcycle delivering a pizza, I am going to receive money from the government or some huge institution or private sector to basically figure out what I want to do. And I'm going to be able to, for the first time in history, work in something which I am passionate and excited about, regardless of how much money it brings.
Exactly. You decouple occupation with income. They were linked long time, too long time.
Right, exactly.
Now, what you do in life is different. What is this sort of money? Right. And right now, there are like multiple examples of that already. You're talking about volunteers. People from America go to Africa just because they believe in the idea, not because it pays off to distribute water in villages.
Right.
So you have like multiple examples of people having like wealthy enough background going to nonprofits, like becoming.
Why do you think they would do that?
Because human intrinsically is driven. That's the answer. Because the nature has made human, in their majority, like of course we're talking some exceptions, but in their majority, the nature has made the human driven and motivated.
Right.
I cannot just like wake up and do nothing because by the middle of the day, I will feel bored, depressed, and we'll have to do something.
So the way that I'm translating that for our audience is based on what you're saying. If I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that human beings are intrinsically motivated by a deep sense of purpose. There's a reason, there has to be a meaningful reason why I get up in the morning every day.
It's a big chunk of human motivation.
Exactly.
And
that purpose and most human beings, the vast majority of human beings, are not able to really do something that gives them purpose because they have to pay the rent, and the way they do it is by driving Uber.
Precisely.
Okay.
Precisely. So, of course, there's like a lot of skeptical opinions that say, hey, like if AI is doing everything, so jobs disappear, people go under the bridge. No way.
Well, that's a legitimate question, though, right? Because one of the things that your argument assumes is that people are motivated enough to figure out what their purpose is and do it, as opposed to, you know what, man, I'm just going to sit home and watch Netflix and play Xbox all day.
Well, my statement is vast majority. So, of course, like 10-20% will prefer that vegetation option.
And do nothing. And just get fat on the couch and eat popcorn and watch Netflix.
Yeah, and maybe nothing is wrong with that. So again, if your robots produce enough good to allow for those people to choose, sit on the couch, if that's what they like, that's fine. It is their freedom to choose do nothing. It's just I'm saying the rest, which is my approximation, maybe 70-80%, which just demand to be driven internally, intrinsically. So they discover the resources, the opportunities to go and do what they love.
Yeah.
And then find the purpose and then feel fulfillment and maybe then become less depressed and less unhappy than they currently are.
I would love to be able to believe you. And I think the world could be a vastly better place if most people could really find the intersection of something that gives them passion, something they're really good at doing, something that the world needs, and something that allows them to survive, right? And in your world, potentially that last piece, which is a big reason why most people don't follow their passions and their purpose, is because they can't make the money to do it, right? In this world of universal basic income, somebody else is paying the bill, the government, the private sector, wealthy people, whoever. My question to you on that, Ilya, is like, from my own personal experience when I lost my job in 2017 as a career CMO in Silicon Valley, and I woke up one day and I realized I was no longer fulfilled. I no longer found purpose in being a CMO. I was devastated because, I think most people watching this show will understand that if you've been fired or if you have to make a significant job change in your life, that is very difficult for most people, right? It's like when you lose your job, the biggest problem is not just the money. The biggest problem is that you lose your sense of identity. You wake up one day and you don't know who the hell you are because you have this LinkedIn bio that says, I'm a product manager, or I'm a marketing manager, or I'm a store manager, or I'm a clerk, of the county sheriff's office, whatever. And then you've lost that job and you don't have that identity anymore, right? So you go through a very dramatic process of losing your identity and trying to figure out what you're going to do next. And in my experience, at least, I had to hire a professional coach and work with that person for 9 months to figure out what my purpose was. And so the whole process of figuring out what I wanted to do was incredibly difficult. And it's not something that's defined, right? So that my question then would be like, how do people who now live in this new world where potentially somebody's paying them universal basic income, they have the freedom and the choice to figure it out. How do they figure it out?
Well, that is a very legit question.
Because I wrote a whole book on this, right? I mean,
yeah,
Step Back and Leap is all about how I found my purpose, and the chapter 2 is all about purpose. And it was incredibly hard for me to figure that out.
You know, like I will respond how my trainer, like a sports trainer, taught me. So he said, Ilya, there is like nothing worse than trying to retrain a person to doing some technical moves, be it swimming or boxing or anything, in the right way. Because once you learn the wrong way, the transition takes effort and pain. Says, I know that you're playing tennis wrong way. You're never gonna be above certain level.
Exactly.
Because your moves are wrong and you're never gonna make it.
Exactly.
But for the next 2 weeks, take the pain by retraining your body to do the right way, because at the end of the 2 weeks, you will become a way better player. Again, it affects like any sports. I've heard it in golf.
Yep, I agree with you.
Tennis, I've heard it in swimming.
I agree.
Everywhere. So in a way, I would say if the society level, and we say, hey, like we have a model now where 70% of people working unhappy, it will take certain transition and pain to shift to something else. Or individual level, saying, hey, like I'm doing my Uber, I'm not happy, but I earn my money, and I will never be ultimately happy. Because as long as I do Uber, I cannot chase my dream. But the transition is painful and difficult. I would say, yes, that's the price you always pay, not just in this world, anywhere. So just mentally prepare and saying, hey, like if that's my ceiling here with my job position, etc., career, but potentially it could be there, but it cannot be just a straight up line. I will have to swallow it.
Absolutely.
I would say my life has taught me that, yes, you just like get all the resources you can and cross the chasm. There's no other way.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think intellectually speaking, that's what I've seen too, is in my life, I experienced that the episodes where I went through the most pain were the ones where I had the most growth and made the most progress. But the sad truth, to some extent, is human beings are creatures of habit, right? We avoid change and we avoid pain until we reach a crisis. Right? Most people, like most businesses, don't change until there's, you have a heart attack. And then you're like, holy shit, I now have to actually stop and watch what I'm eating, right? Or I now have to start running or working out or whatever, right? Or like you get cancer and you're like, okay, maybe now I need to stop smoking. So while I agree with you, intellectually speaking, my experience kind of working as a coach, and I've worked all over the world with very senior, very talented, smart people. Even with those people who are type A performers, I have had clients where the person just could not get out of their own way. And I've had to give up on them as a coach and be like, you know what? You're at a stage in your career right now where you're just not coachable. You're going to have a crisis. You're going to have to take a smack in the face and like fall on your ass really hard until you're going to make a change. That's what it's going to take. For a lot of people, that's what it takes. So what does that mean in the short term?
Well, I think you pointed a very deep, very important, I would say, top 5 most important human dilemmas.
Right.
Short term
versus long term.
Anything, like we're talking about the personality and character traits.
Yeah.
So I want to lie to somebody, I get short-term avail at the expense of long-term breach of reputation. If I'm like doing sports, it's so seductive to follow the old-fashioned and technical move. In exchange, losing the long-term opportunity to be something bigger.
Absolutely.
So that's my observation, that people do suffer a lot from optimizing a short-term gain at the expense of long-term loss.
I absolutely agree with you.
That's one of the fundamental.
It's the whole, I think there was a study that was done at Stanford or somewhere, with kids and cupcakes. You remember that study?
Yes.
Where it's delayed gratification, and they put this kid in a room with a cupcake, and they tell them, this is a cupcake. It's delicious. If you can refrain from eating this cupcake for the next half hour, when we come back, we will give you a second one. And what they did was they studied these kids, and they saw that the kids who were able to resist eating the cupcake and then got the second one, if they studied those kids and they did like these longitudinal studies over decades, they found that those kids ended up being far more successful because they were able to resist the impulse of eating the cupcake later on in their life with other things. They had this idea of delayed gratification, and so they would resist things in the short term because they knew the long-term benefits were true. And the opposite was also true. The kids that consumed the cupcake, they didn't do as well as the others because they couldn't develop that muscle.
Well, to develop on that idea, the scientists also measured why that happens.
Right.
So when they measured the brain activity, what happens when I take versus I resist and wait. So they discovered an interesting insight. Then whenever I think about myself in the future, although my logic, my brain says it's same me in pension or 10 years from now, but I perceive as a different person. It's not me. So I tend to think about myself in future, same as I tend to think about a different person. And now the model changes completely. So when you say about the cake, it's me getting the cake now. It's somebody else getting the cake 10 minutes later. So not connecting short-term versus long-term is a fundamental, systematic human challenge. And as you say, those who choose to go beyond that instinct and see themselves and see the long-term value, those tend to do better everywhere. But again, that brings us to the exactly same question. So do I suffer my job now, every single day, feel like somewhat unhappy, somewhat okay, but not taking the 2 weeks or 2 months pain? Or just swallow that frog and enjoy a better life.
I agree 100%. I mean, you know, in like the latest keynotes that I've been doing for large enterprises, you know, that's kind of like, I talk about 5 pillars of resilience, right? What are the 5 things that we need to be, that we need to do to become resilient? And one of them is to do hard things, right? That the harder things that we do and the more we develop that muscle to do difficult things, like you said, the more we can continue to try new things and the easier it becomes even when we fail. This is super fascinating. I could geek out and talk about this all day, but I want to go back to the conversation around AI because of the work that you're doing at Nextree, because of the fact that you're European, and because of your views on Europe versus the US. When I look at the media, and obviously media is not always right. We all have our issues with the media, but when you look at the literature and the data that's coming out, you see that there is a perception, which I think is real, that in the age of artificial intelligence, the US and China are just zooming past Europe, right? It's no comparison in terms of the innovation, in terms of capital going into AI-backed companies, in terms of where the talent is congregating, in terms of the amount of money that's being put into it. I remember I received a proposal from a bunch of academics in Europe at one of Europe's top business schools putting together money for a fund. And it read like an academic paper. And in the end, with all the flowers and whistles they were talking about, they were only looking to raise $5 million, right? Which for me is symptomatic of some of the thinking that we see coming out of Europe. What needs to change in Europe for Europe to punch not even above its weight, but at its weight in terms of being a player in artificial intelligence and creating an ecosystem of innovation for artificial intelligence? What needs to change?
Well, there's a bunch of theoretical suggestions: invest more, be open, blah, blah, blah. But this is kind of abstract. That does not happen just because you talk about that. So I'm very afraid, being a European, very afraid that the future of Europe resembling of the future of Soviet Union, because I lived in Soviet Union.
Yeah, Lithuania was part of the Soviet Union when you were a kid.
Yeah, it was like over-regulated, over-controlled on anything. Like the way we produce candies is regulated by the party committee somewhere in Moscow. How much sugar and what shape should candies have, et cetera, et cetera. So they tried what we call the command economy, where everything was planned by the bureaucrats as opposed to open market. And what it caused is that once you do regulation of every aspect of life, then you leaning on stagnation. So no longer innovation happens. At some point, that brings you a collapse, complete collapse, because you are unable to compete with the rest of the world.
Why do you get that stagnation? I mean, obviously there are many reasons.
Well, because again, if every single aspect, again, remembering the Soviet Union, like you are not allowed. So if I want to produce candy or bake bread, I'm not allowed.
Right.
I'm not allowed. I could be put in jail for just like baking, some bread and selling it on the street. I would put it in jail because there's like a factory, amount of bread is regulated by the party, and it says we took our scientists that calculated that we need like so many loaves of bread, blah, blah, blah. Reality is not a single institution, party, government, etc. is a super brain. There's like no way you can decide what's better for the whole society. There is no way because like a gazillion little aspects. Well, somebody prefers sweeter bread, somebody prefers darker bread, somebody this, somebody that. You cannot centralized way run every single aspect. So what happened to the Soviet Union, a combination of both. First, they kill any private initiatives, kill illegal.
Right.
You put in jail for like producing shoes, like producing T-shirts, producing bread. They say everything will be taken care of by the government and the party.
Yeah.
And then they miserably failed at being able to fulfill that. So we ended up in a deficit era. Like I was the kid responsible for standing in line in the morning to get toilet paper.
Jesus.
I would stand 3 hours because as a kid, you have responsibility. Somebody washing dishes, somebody stands in line. Because unless you take the line at 6 o'clock in the morning, by the time it hits 7 and the store is open, there's no toilet paper. Period. I faced that. So, I mean, luckily as a kid...
That's crazy. It's crazy to think that happened.
Yes, so this is how collapse or pre-collapse looks like internally. Like everything is a deficit. You cannot buy shoes, you cannot buy T-shirts, you cannot buy sugar, you cannot buy anything because the system is just like miserably failing.
But Europe isn't at that extreme, right? It's not like people are doing
specifically. Yes, I specifically. So this is exactly where I think Europe is heading. And again, to give you data, because I'm also supporting my cases with data. So if you took a look at year 85, yes, 40 years ago, GDP per capita, European versus American in today's dollars and $25 were $17,000 per capita per year. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
We have exactly same GDP. We have exactly same population, approximately 300 mil each.
Yeah.
So the starting point, approximately the same. Now, scroll 40 years later, America maintained mostly the liberal way.
Yeah.
Europe has chosen the Soviet Union style regulation for everything. Every single aspect is regulated from Brussels.
Yeah.
So in 25, my best knowledge is Europe on average now makes approximately 35,000 in today's dollars per capita per year.
Yeah.
US is at 70.
Right.
So twice in 40 years, US on average became twice as wealthy on the relatively short historical course.
Yeah.
So to me, that is definitely already not a symptom, but a very, very visible sign of stagnation. So we're looking at Asian countries bypassing Europe on productivity. If you are unable to build product, you are unable to fund your army, unable to fund, to invest into the future, etc. So that's exactly what stagnation looks like.
Yeah.
Again, luckily back from like 60s, 70s, Europe still has like enough reserve. So we will drag maybe for another like 20, 30 years. But innovation simply not happening. So Europe is not getting its fair share of the new pie. The pie grows dramatically, exponentially.
It's crazy, yeah.
The world wealth just grows exponentially, and the Europe maintains lower and lower share. At some point, I think it's not going to last because legitimately people start asking, just as in Soviet Union, hey, like what's going on? Like why the cost of living is crazy? That is currently the issue in the UK. They say we're unable to pay for electricity, for food, weighted by inflation. UK now lives worse than in 55.
Right.
So people are more poor because they have social programs, they have regulations, they have all this and that and that and that. And Brexit is only the glimpse of what's going to come. So at some point, I'm fearing that's exactly the same fate as the Soviet Union will come. Countries will start just like separating, saying like, why in that like union? When everything is great, people tend to just like do nothing.
Yeah.
When people go wrong and saying, hey, like the doctor in America gets 10 times salary than me in Germany. So this is where it's become unstable. And this is might be leading to like collapse, or every country in Europe just separates and says, I won't wait.
But the counter argument that I think Europeans would make, and as a European, I think there's some fairness to this, is they would say, okay, GDP per person in the United States is higher, Americans are wealthier. The flip side is you look at the data and you would see that Americans are fatter, they're more depressed, they're unhealthier, they are more they're more unhappy. And you look at the happiness index, which is published, I think, by the UN every year. The top countries continue to be the same ones, continue to be the Scandinavian questions on average. And the United States, I think, has fallen dramatically in terms of, the average happiness of the population. People, to me, having moved back to the United States 2 years ago, I've been shocked by how anxious, how depressed, how lonely, and how stressed out Americans are. And so there's got to be a middle ground. I mean, the U.S. is doing a lot of good things in terms of promoting innovation, and we're doing very well in terms of AI and innovation. But at what cost, right? So how do we find that balance between, finding a way for people to be not working to death, right, like they do in certain places, but then also encouraging more openness and getting less regulation and finding more innovation? Can we even find that balance? Is it possible?
Well, again, this is where exactly AI falls into a very nice niche.
Right.
Because before, I'm talking like 10, 20 years ago, to chase the dollar, you have to sacrifice your life, right? To earn like everybody else. Unless you do, you're like a loser in the society. You don't have the latest iPhone, you don't have the latest Tesla, whatever. So you're a loser. So you have to kill hours in the office. So you have to go to like 80, 70 hours working days. Now AI can take the heavy lift.
Right.
So I think we're facing, first time in human history, facing the world. We're saying, hey, like to produce good, no longer you have to spend 100 hours in the office.
Right.
Because efficiency is what's going to take the heavy lift. But again, I would not directly link the innovations versus like happiness. They not necessarily intercorrelate, not necessarily.
True.
So I would name countries like Switzerland, which is like one of my like most admired countries in the world. Definitely like in the continent of Europe, because it is not part of European Union, just on the record.
Yeah.
So their GDP is fine. It's actually higher than the US.
Okay.
And on the record, and they've been able to combine the friendly to innovation environment. It's a very liberal country. There's like a lot of democracy. Unlike the rest of the world, we vote on everything as a society, like building a bridge, let's vote, do a referendum on everything. So I think they combined the best of the two worlds. And there are examples of countries like that. I would name like Singapore, like Dubai is very high on the list.
Yeah.
Luxembourg is a small, tiny, like I would say almost un-European country, and so on and so on. So those countries are live examples where not necessarily like liberal, innovation-friendly environment leads to unhappiness. Totally the opposite.
Mm-hmm. So it begs my last question of the show before we wrap up. And this is, I think we could do a whole separate episode. So we have to have a separate episode on this. Given, how AI is improving our productivity, potentially making our lives much easier, potentially requiring us to work less, potentially requiring us to have less people working, what do you see as the role of AI in government? I mean, if you look at how schizophrenic our governments are, how leaderless our governments are, how spineless many of our governments are, how it just seems that every country in the world that you look at, democracy seems to be flailing around and frankly generating a lot of news for the media, but getting very little done for the average citizen. What's the role of AI in government?
Okay, so I'll try to be short since we don't have too much time left.
Yeah, I'm going to have to ask you the answer in 2 minutes, but...
Yeah, and I'm definitely looking forward to expand on that. Like, short answer is democracy as a model. It's not the worst, because apparently they are much worse. It takes humankind so far, and actually pretty far, but it's not best either. It could be improved. And by definition, democracy is the discrimination of a minority by the majority, regardless of the human virtues, values, etc.
Yeah.
If a majority votes, we shall kill that guy, regardless of his wrong or right.
Yeah.
The guy gets killed, period.
Right.
So intrinsically, democracy is not the best model to reflect and enforce our human virtues and values. Now, where AI is very helpful is it's apparently unconditional. So regardless of my motivation, corruption, uncompetentness, etc., if we as a humankind say, hey, like life is value, we must defend it at whatever cost, and regardless of what the majority thinks, and we say, hey, like you, the AI, need to just make sure that whatever we do, in every act, in every like media, we defend our values. I think this is where the heavy lift could be taken by AI, and the society could be more like a derivative of our values, as opposed to derivative of a majority of opinion. And I believe that the society should be built first on values, not on the majority.
I agree. Absolutely. I think that's a very fair point. And so if I'm understanding you correctly, you believe that to the extent that we can use artificial intelligence to create more rational decision making at the government level,
society level, because
society level.
Put aside the government part.
So AI makes decisions at society level. You believe that ultimately brings back sounder, better decision making, which is more values based.
Exactly.
And therefore gets us to better, faster, sounder decision.
Value-driven society, as opposed to majority/government/public opinion-driven.
Amazing. I mean, we are definitely going to have a separate episode just on that topic.
Happy to.
All right. As we wind down, 3 rapid-fire questions with rapid-fire answers before we close. One tech trend that you think is totally overhyped. Overhyped.
Well, for very, very, very now, I've seen like nuclear fusion as a promise to all cures. Mid, long term, it's definitely underhyped. Short term, massively overhyped. Knowing what's boiling in the physics, I think that the headlines not there yet.
All righty. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
Ability to predict everything.
Ability to see the future.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, see the future, you can shape.
Ability to shape the future.
No. By the way, ability to predict brings you into a world where you can shape the future the way you like, not just see it.
Gotcha. Okay. Complete the sentence. The world belongs to?
The people, of course.
All righty. Ilja, man, it's been awesome to have you on the show. Loved our conversation. Super interesting. So many different things, so many different angles we could go on. All right, guys. Well, that is a wrap. Awesome to have you on the show, and we will see you guys on the next episode later.